Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we're going to be talking to Tim Shields about his newest book, A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium. So welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So you're in Mexico right now. You've been on these incredible journeys. What brings you to
Mhm.
Mexico?
That's a great question. I guess the short answer would be I came down here for love and I'm going to stay for the tacos. So the love
Okay.
didn't quite work out. But yeah, I was in like a long distance relationship well, I came down here to finish my book in May 2017.
hmm
Uh, Met somebody in Mexico City. We did this long distance relationship thing for 15 months. And I was finishing a book project for somebody else in September, and all the conditions lined up for me to move down here. And I figured, well, I could be in Seattle and be in the hustle, or I could come down to Mexico, explore this relationship, and live a more tranquilo life. So the relationship kind of blew up in a month, but it found me in Mexico, and I'm just allowing things to unfold and hopefully find out the reason why I'm down here.
So if it wasn't for the girlfriend, then maybe now it's about just who knows. And
Well, yeah.
what's the place that you're living in right now?
Well, it's interesting because I kind of manifested the perfect place. It's this big modern loft. However, the landlady just told me she wants her place back for her family.
Oh yeah.
So it's been a bit topsy-turvy here. Definitely a huge exercise in surrender and trust. So, which is kind of the whole crux of my book. And now I'm like having to live it at a whole new, deeper level.
Life
It's
just
like
gives you more tests to learn.
either more tests or a bigger narrative. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I also the other half of why I came down here is because I'm trying to put together the next three books in my head.
Wow.
So I have, this wall with post-it notes all over the place, and I'm just, not formally writing, but just writing down in my notebook ideas and all over the wall.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, sometimes my sister's like, that's not accessible language to everyone, but sort of the first book is about overcoming the self.
hmm
And, I guess the easier way is just all of those voices that are not loving to us and all of those stories that keep us, in this loop of the past as opposed to moving into our future. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to sort of put these together as the evolution of consciousness.
Okay,
So
so the first book that you wrote is The Overcoming of Self, which is the A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium. And
correct.
what's the trilogy? What are the other ones that are coming that seem to be coming forth that kind of mark your evolution towards consciousness?
Well, the second one is the awakening that consciousness is actually the organizing principle of matter as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to consciousness coming out of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the third one is about the journey of the calling, which, they're all based on my life, and it's definitely fictionalized. And I would imagine as they move on, it will become even more fictionalized. But
Mm-hmm.
so the third one was after I finished editing this book project for someone. I asked him, if you could go anywhere to write a book, where would you go? And he said, San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. You'll never want to leave. And all of a sudden, never heard of it before, and it just popped up in my vision everywhere. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to San Miguel. So I came down here, and that is really sort of, I guess, the fruition or the actualization of my 17-year-old self, the dream of being, a writer and just traveling the world and sharing what I've learned out of my experiences and hoping that it is a mirror for a lot of other people. And so far, that has been the reception. But so, yeah, when I was down here, um, it was almost like I was so in the flow and in the moment. It was like my thoughts were being reflected back to me like that day. And I was just kind of, all of this crazy stuff was happening. And, I had these amazing, beautiful people show up in my life who were like mentors. And, my two closest friends in this town are like 65 and 72-year-old women. Um, I know I'm a ladies' man. Um, but because you got to know your audience, right?
Exactly.
Um, but they're like amazing people, and they've kind of coached me. And it's always I'm one of my biggest things is trusting myself. I can trust other people, I can trust whatever, but so that is part of it. And then the fourth one is about the initiation, which I thought was going to be moving deeper into this, loving relationship, because I've had a lot of relationships in my life, but and I probably could be married 2 or 3 times over, but I always felt like I had to do this writing thing first because it is my calling. So the initiation I thought was about moving deeper into this relationship, and that just imploded in a spectacular way. And so it's really, I'm like learning, I'm like, duh, dummy. It's about this the deeper relationship with myself and and I'm learning like, I have to become the person I want to be in the relationship. I have to become, the New York Times best-selling writer. If that's what I want, it's like, that is, I think, the process of manifestation. You need to become that which you want to become, like ahead of the experience, because we could go into the physics and putting the vibrations out in the field and all that stuff. So yeah, that's sort of what I'm trying to put together right now and I've started the second book. I've got about 5 chapters in, but I'm like really so, because I'm living it right now, like so deeply into the 4th book and all of these like profound, humbling learnings that I look forward to sharing at some point.
So you have different life experiences and you're kind of mapping it out and as these life experiences occur. I have this vision of your boards now, or your house, where you have little ideas, that you have little stickies on the wall with like ideas that you put in the first, second, third, or fourth, or second, third, or fourth book.
You've got it.
That's what my vision is. So you have an experience with your 65-year-old girlfriend, and
she's not my girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend. Let's put that one.
Well, they're friends and they're girls, or women. Your women friends, your mentors, or you have an experience with the mature older women, and so you have an experience or like have an aha or an insight. You write it down, and you're like, aha, this goes in the book on initiation or the book on awakening. Interesting.
You pretty much nailed it. Yeah, I've got like 3 sort of verticals on my wall, and it's like post-it note, just moving things around and trying to, I'm doing it this way because I want these through, to, I don't want them to be, at some point I want somebody, my readers to be able to put all of these things together. And, I haven't actually kind of figured out, I talked about it a little bit in my first book, just in one instant. But I call them like quantum strings, and they're these little things that show up in our life, and they are strings through time. And it's like, I think it's like they show up at certain moments, and it's like a reminder of who you were, who you are, and who you're becoming. So like it could be a song, like Eyes of the World by the Grateful Dead was like my favorite song. And it was like, I can become that 17-year-old kid, like driving around the back roads of New Jersey with like my dog, Harry, my little Yorkshire Terrier, and like dreaming about the future and being a writer and like, what's going to become of my life? And, that dreaming process is actually the creation process.
So I'm curious, when you went to the 17-year-old version, like you had visions at 17 years old, you knew you wanted to be a writer at that point. And what was that? I mean, so was it your future calling you to, it's like your future from calling you at that age 17 going like, you need to be a writer. And you're like, I need to be a writer. Or what manifested at that moment? Because it could be both directions. When I talk to people who talk about time, if there is no time, it could be a future you saying, you need to be a writer, Tim, whatever you do, remember. I mean, what was it when you were 17 that made you certain that you wanted to be a writer? And then what happened from that point on? Did you become a writer? I know that you had a stint in corporate America. What happened?
Yeah. Well, I guess like my freshman year of high school, I wrote this poem and Brother Regis loved it, and it got like inserted into the school literary magazine, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like the only freshman, sophomore, junior that got into this literary
Mm.
magazine. So I had these people that kind of, saw something,
Mm-hmm.
saw some sort of sensitive, expressive person. And my sister's boyfriend way back in the day, who was also, he became a mentor and everything. And um, he was an aspiring writer and kept a journal. And, September 29th, 1991, it was like, I was like in love with this girl, and then this fellow soccer player died, and I just started to put my pen to paper, and I never stopped. And now I have
Mm.
probably 53 journals of my life on paper,
Wow.
but it was like, um, is it nature or is it nurture? I don't know. It's like I'm the youngest by 9 years in my family,
Oh, wow.
so it's almost like I was an only child for a long time.
Mm.
Like my siblings were off in college when I was sort of growing up.
Mm.
So I mean, being a very sensitive kid, I just kind of, turned inward and began expressing that through, through the written word. And it took a very long time to call myself an artist or a writer, because I was like, well, I'm not worthy. And, but at the same, but I just, like anything you do, you just, when you feel something, if you are connected to it, the idea, you just keep moving into it
Mm-hmm.
no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember at one point, like 22 or 23, right before my senior year of college, I had like sort of, I guess you could call it writer's block, and just sort of this breakdown of sorts. And I was like, Mom, I think I need to see a therapist. Like things are not going good in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw a therapist twice, and he's like, okay, you're a writer, yeah. What other outlets do you have? And I'm like, I don't know. Music's my other passion. And he's like, well, get a guitar and start playing music. I'm like, I'm 22 years old. I can't learn guitar.
Right.
So it's obviously ridiculous. And, a couple of years later, I had a band. And so I don't know. I just think for any sort of artist, or actually any human being, really, you need some channel to express these, this mix up of feelings and emotions that occur inside of us that we call the
Mm.
human condition.
Mm.
So,
So how did you, so a lot of people would love to be a writer. They're in corporate
mm,
America and are afraid to do the jump that you made. How were you
yeah,
able to get out? As if it's a prison. How were you able to
trust me.
escape the prison?
Yeah. I don't need corporate America. I have my own prison, but that was a pretty big prison too. I just kept moving forward, and I
Well, what
wrote a
was your
terrible.
job in corporate America? Tell us a little bit. Like, what were you doing? And like, when was the day that you're like, aha, I'm going to become a writer finally?
Well, I mean, it's what I always it's what I always knew and what I was always doing. The corporate job was just something to pay the bills while I was doing the other stuff. But I was a writer in like marketing and advertising,
Ah, okay, got
and
it.
I put in my time for T-Mobile, Microsoft. I mean, you know, if you wanted a lot of companies that like to beat the creativity out of you and just lower things down to the lowest common denominator. Did I just say that? Oh my God, there goes my career at Microsoft. Um, so I just kept doing that, but I was a freelancer, and
Mm,
so I'd work for a while, and then as I got older and finally got out of debt and stuff, I would work for a while, and then I would take off and travel for a bit, because I knew at a very young age, like 17, reading Joyce and Steinbeck and Kerouac in high school, I knew that if you wanted to have big things to write about, you had to have big life experiences.
mm,
So my first one, and my first sort of book attempt after that, which was just a proposal. I think I was about 33, and a relationship and a job ended in the same week, and I was like, I think life's trying to tell me something. Uh, Seems like a lot revolves around relationships in
right.
my. There's something I need to look at. But I took off to an orphanage in Tanzania for 2 months,
Wow.
and I volunteered in an orphanage, and I met this incredible woman. If anybody wants to look it up, it's called the Rift Valley Children's Village
Mm-hmm.
in Tanzania. And she was from Long Island. I won't go into her story. Actually, I knew it was an incredible establishment, and I was trying to write her story, but her main benefactor fancied herself a writer and was like, I'm going to write this book. So I got ousted. The book's never been written, but a decade later, it got discovered by 60 Minutes.
Oh,
So
wow.
see her
Oh.
on 60 Minutes. So, the next couple years, I just kept doing working, traveling. My buddy and I tried to do our own travel show in
Hmm.
Europe, which was just a complete ridiculous mess. It turned out being two knuckleheads from New Jersey trying to do a travel show. Um, I mean, everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Cameras stolen, us being like, F you, I'm going this way. Um, that would be actually a very funny show. But at some point, when everything really kind of started to unfurl,
Hmm.
I think in like May 2015, maybe I went to my first advanced workshop of Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Hmm.
And for about however long it was, 4.5 days or something, I was just meditating on the right conditions to show up for me to bring my book to fruition. And one of the things that I knew needed to happen was that I needed a full-time job because I
Hmm.
needed that financial stability base. Um, so I'm at this workshop struggling. I'm like, I'm not doing it right. Everybody's having these mystical experiences, but what I've learned now is like my mystical experiences occur in the external, like the way
Mm.
synchronicities and serendipities happen. So I get off the plane in Seattle, and this guy reaches out to me, and he's like, "Hey, I'm at this." He was at Microsoft for 10 years. He's like, "I'm at this new company. It's supposed to be like the next unicorn, next Uber, and we need a writer." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll check it out." I didn't think much more of it. So then I take the train back into the city, and I run into him on a street corner, and I'm like, "Okay,
Oh my
I guess
gosh, you're
I guess I'm supposed to
kidding
really support
me.
this." So I wind up getting this job that paid me more money than I ever thought I would make,
Wow.
plus bonuses. And um, I every day before work, I would go to a coffee shop for 30 minutes or 60 minutes, and I would just work on this terrible draft that I was like stuck on. The voice, any artist, creative, the voice in your head's like, this is terrible. Nobody's gonna connect with this. So that draft took exactly 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, I got laid off. But I was in such an amazing place. I was like, all right, what incredible thing's going to happen to me? And within 5 minutes, this person that I really, really wanted to work with texted me, and he was like, hey, what would you think about working on my blog with me? And I was like, oh, this is certainly interesting. So he's, kind of a leader in the field of like transformation consciousness. And so he kind of, one of the things I also wanted to create was a mentor when I was at that workshop. And this guy shows up. So I reached out to this other company who was trying to court me at the time, and they're like, "We just filled that position. Sorry." They called me Monday. They said, "What if we can create a position for you?" And I was like, "Let's do this." So that took about like 3 weeks or something to get the paperwork in order. They offered me $40,000 more than the last time they offered me a job,
Wow.
and then I was like, "Well, could I start in like 5 weeks?" And they were like, "Okay, we waited long enough. That's fine." So, I took off to South Africa for a bit, went skiing in Whistler. I actually had this moment. It was my first morning in South Africa. And it was totally different time zones. And I'm like, I'm just going to run. I haven't run in like 4 months. And I just had this amazing run. And I'm coming back. I actually haven't ever told anybody this, but I'm coming back, and on random comes Eyes of the World, which is that song from that 17-year-old kid. And
Oh,
I'm just
wow.
on the beach in South Africa, and I'm like, this will be in a book, but I'm like, I just started bawling. I'm like, I'm doing it. I did it.
Oh.
Like my dream was to just be able to travel all over the world and write my own stuff, and I just was like, when that song comes on, there's something for me mystically entwined in it. And it just, so, so yeah, I had this amazing winter, and I thought I was going to be at that job until now. And the person who I was helping the blog with he was like, would you be interested in helping me with my book? And I said, watch how fast I quit my 9 to 5. So I quit my 9 to 5. I worked with him for 6 months. After that, I came down to Mexico, went back to Seattle, did a little agency work, freelance agency work here and there. And then I was getting kind of desperate. And I was like, man, I guess I got to go back into corporate America. And, well, this is kind of a good manifesting story, but I had, at the turn of last year, I quit alcohol, sugar, and caffeine, cold turkey.
Wow.
The hardest part was sugar. And it was a 21-day cleanse, and I barely went out, and I was just meditating every day. And I was like meditating, like, show me what's next, show me what's next. Kind of at the end of the second week, I could start to finally feel my future moving towards me. And I was like, thank God, I don't know what it is, but I'm finally connected with this thing in the field. And I just wound up writing finalized book deal on January 31st, which was the last day of the sugar cleanse. I had no idea what that meant. I woke up that morning and I was like, I feel amazing. What amazing thing's going to happen?
Right.
And I didn't actually expect anything, but I said it out loud.
Right.
And I go to KXP, which is like this coffee shop radio station in Seattle, open my computer, and there's this email in the from field from this guy who I read his book like 17 years ago. And he said, hey, Tim, we got your name from Hay House and we really want to work with you. And I was like, I'm like looking around. I'm like, is this a joke? Am I being punked right now? Where's Ashton Kutcher? Where's Ashton Kutcher? So I wound up like working on that book, and it should be done by now. We're very close, but so yeah, I mean, I'm in this place in my life that it's been one of the hardest times since like my mom died, my house burned down, which is a whole other story. Yeah, big things come to me because I want to write about big things. So, but I know like some amazing things are happening, and it's just another like more bigger lessons to just like, you have to move deeper inward. You have to trust more. And I mean, I think like when you're on this sort of, when you make your life about the soul's journey, you just keep moving deeper and deeper and deeper into this labyrinth. And you're like, just when you think you got it figured out, you come around the corner and there's like 6 more doors, and you're like, shit, I have no idea. you just have to like trust. You have to surrender and trust. Right. You have to create as well. You have to be a part of the creative process. You put what you want out into the field, and get out of the way, which is the hardest part, because you're always trying to manufacture and wonder, how is this going to come? And then the moment you take your attention off, it's like, I never could have created this in my wildest dreams. So, yeah. So that's kind of.
So that's how you got from corporate America into like.
Yeah, it's kind of a long story, but it was.
It's interesting.
It was like not.
Yeah.
It was more like synchronicity, serendipity. Knowing that I had this calling, and just kind of like, I'm here when you're ready, and obviously I had to become the person internally before I could be that ready to express.
And you're
things.
writing books with people who are spiritual. So I've got to believe like that's so much more fulfilling than writing about Microsoft Office. And
oh my God.
It's just a different. I used to work at Microsoft, so I know, because I used to be the person reviewing the copy, going, "What kind of life is this?" God,
that's hilarious.
Yes, I was the person going, "Why am I doing this?" Okay, that's not on point. Okay, that is on point. It's.
I just have to share this with you because you'll get a kick out of this. I was in this meeting one time, like 10 people, mostly my own team, luckily. And we had this boss who just became a tyrant. And we're sitting there and like arguing about like pixels or something stupid. And it comes around to me and they're like, what do you think, Tim? And I just sit back and I go, I can't believe this is my life. Every laugh except the boss. And turns out I lost my job a short time after that. Hey, I'm just honest. What can I say?
Exactly. All right. So here's the weird thing about life. I don't know, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a gentleman who is going across the country traveling as a way of exploring. He also has a corporate job of which he's like, anyways, he's unwinding, but he took a 3 or 4 month hiatus to drive across the country, encouraging people to write letters to their loved ones before they pass. And his story, but beautiful story, is writing a letter. He's taking class in college, wrote this letter to his mom and about how much he loved her. And
Yeah.
she reads the letter, calls him up, says, "I got the letter, I read the letter, it was such a sweet letter," and then proceeds to walk out the door and literally gets hit by a car and dies. So
The guy did?
the mom reads a love letter from her
Oh
son
my
and
God.
dies. And ties by this whole experience because he had a very close connection with his mom. And
Yeah.
then yesterday, just literally just yesterday, I talked to a gentleman who went on a spiritual journey. He was in Switzerland, and he was very close to both his mother and father. His mother was alive. His father passed, and then his two grandparents passed as well.
Wow.
And so his mother lost three people in the course of 6 months, as did he. And he was so traumatized, like he was just walking around like a zombie for 2 years, and then was calling out for
Wow.
God, and then like went to Hawaii, and now lives a life sort of like you do. So something is happening where he basically, I said, "So what's your life like?" And he said, "Well, I can only live 3 months in the U.S. because he's from Switzerland, so he has like a visa for
Okay.
3 months in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Then he spends 3 months or a certain period of time in Europe. Then he basically, and he doesn't know where he's going to live. He just meditates, and he and
Oh
his
my God.
wife,
Yeah. He and I
they
should talk.
they meditate and go like, Spirit, please take me where I should be." And he has in the back of his mind to visit every sacred place, that has sacred energy. So that's
Yeah.
kind of his like, what it is. So then he goes to these places, and he and his wife go, they don't even know what they'll be doing. But they go, they plop themselves down. This is pure surrender. Plop
Yeah. That's
themselves
what I'm
down.
trying to do.
They plop themselves down. They think, well, something's going to happen because it always does. They end up teaching workshops, which they get paid for, so that they basically pay their way for their trip and anything else.
Wow.
And then they do meditations in these. They do their workshops in these sacred places, and almost every time they said inevitably they get a download from spirit of that
Wow.
particular sacred place. So, maybe Nityananda when they're in Ganesh Puri, or some some whatever
Yeah.
spiritual being comes, and that's how they co-develop and collaborate their work. And I said, "Oh, well, how long have you been doing this?" Thinking like, I just tried 6 months ago. He's been doing it since 2012.
Wow.
And I thought, wow. And so here you are, and he's from Hawaii. So then when you said aloha, I'm like,
Yeah.
seriously, another guy from Hawaii? But it was Ola. Anyhow,
Hola.
Ola. So and here you are living a similar kind of life. Like you're
Yeah.
basically, and I have two kids, both of which I'm soon to be an empty nester, and
Mm.
I go
Oh
through the
wow.
same thing about. After going to a workshop, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he was kind of proposing like need to surrender and just let life do you. And
Yeah.
I'd actually am a career coach, and so I'm coaching people on what they need to do to move to their next step. And when I do so, there's always like, all the basics, like get your resume ready. There's kind of rational things that people want to do because if
Yeah.
they led their career like I do, then they would probably feel crazy. But for
Yeah.
me, I just like I'll get something and I'll say I don't do business development or sales anymore. I just
Yeah.
meditate, and then people come from out of the blue offering me jobs, and I just don't even understand how it happens. But it does
Yeah.
happen if you're open to, if you're surrendering enough to know. I have, a few parameters, but aside
Yeah.
from, it's like and the parameters are really general, like I want to be happy, I want to have flexibility, things like that. But bring me stuff.
Totally. I do the same thing. Yeah. I
So,
mean,
yeah. What are your parameters?
uh,
How do you go about manifesting the incredible things that you've manifested?
um, it's a great question. I mean, I wish I had a formula because I would be uh, doing some other things right now. But I also think there's always these incubation periods where, I just wrote something recently, um, and I want to coin the phrase pushing tinfoil. But like, I was like, imagine that like this is the quantum field. It's a piece of tinfoil. And
Hmm.
then you have like your phone or a block or whatever that intention is. And like, the more you push into that, the more, the universe is malleable to our thoughts, even more our thoughts and who we're being. Most of us are running unconscious programs. And man, I just got really, I mean, I don't even want to give it that much more attention, but I just sat in the fire for a week at Dr. Joe's workshop. I went there and my ex-girlfriend was there and she was like four doors down and it was like everywhere I saw her.
Her room was
And
four
then
doors down from
from
yours.
my hotel.
Oh,
Yeah.
jeez.
And then she like wound up, and it's her life. She can do what she wants, but she wound up like shacking up with somebody there. So it was in my face the whole time. And I was like, I was so not present for the whole workshop, which is like
Oh.
the whole point of it. And I like, it was like practically post traumatic stress from, this
Mm.
relationship, just like see her, whatever. And, but the final morning, I mean, I even see her waiting for my ride. I see her coming back from his room, same clothes. And it's comical. And then, so like the last couple days, it's just like these downloads and just, I mean, she will be one of my most profound soul teachers.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine, Beth Bell, says big love reveals big wounds. And, you know, I think it's finally like the pain is finally out of me. It's
Hmm.
not necessarily in my body anymore. And now I really have to look really deeply at myself and be like, why did I allow these things to happen?
Hmm.
Like, and just really look at the learnings. And Dr. Joe would say, like, it's all look at your life as an initiation. That way you're not the victim, you're the creator.
Mm.
So, I mean, I am grateful for what an incredible narrative this will be in the fourth book. Um, but so yeah, I forget where we were going, but you were saying something about earlier. This guy wrote a letter to his mom, and I think almost like my mom always said I should be uh, a writer or a teacher, and
Mm.
I think hopefully I am a little bit of a teacher through my writing, and I hope to teach someday writing probably, but I don't know if you got a chance to read the prologue, but
I did.
yeah, I mean, I had a decade of sick parents, and when everybody was going home, when everybody was going on vacations and stuff, I was going to visit, my parents in New Jersey. My dad had like lung cancer and emphysema, and it was kind of kept from me for a long time because I'm the baby and I was on the West Coast. But it was like my mom was slipping from Parkinson's and dementia, and
Mm.
every time I went home to see her, it was like a little bit more of her was gone, and
Mm.
it was brutal. It was brutal, but in a way, I think like my book is almost like a love letter to my mom. I mean,
Mm.
in the beginning, there is that I'm saying goodbye to my mom at a nursing home and stuff. Not me,
Oh.
Thomas, but yeah, this character that bears a striking resemblance to me. But yeah, I mean, I was imagine like every time me rewriting that in a coffee shop, just being like, because I call myself a mama's boy. I was very, very close with my mom, and
No.
my dad was like a World War II Purple Heart veteran, so he was like pretty closed off. And I'm thinking like the second book will kind of be more of like the masculine, and because I think the first book is sort of a little bit. I mean, it is more about my mom, and then I think my parts of the masculine will be spread throughout the second book.
Mm.
But yeah,
So it's
it's,
interesting because you wrote in the prologue that you went because you had a soul ache, and with the question of like, who am I, and hoping that the traveling would help you. I don't know. Tell me a little bit about when you went into your mom died. You're very close to your mom,
yeah,
and you know, I was very close to my dad. So and
mm,
I'm hearing all these stories about people who've lost parents that they've been very, very close to and feel this
yeah,
kind of, it's almost like this catastrophic wounding.
yeah,
And I'm going through the same thing, even though my dad died a long time ago. He died, and then we had kids, and I never really had a time to grieve. And
yeah,
now with both of my sons, who were very, I don't know if they would call themselves mama's boys, but they're very close. We're very close
yeah.
family, and them leaving is kind of bringing back all these grieving feelings that I never really resolved
I
with my
bet.
dad's leaving. So when a loved one leaves, it's kind of like, if you don't, let me put this way, I realized that because I didn't necessarily, and I don't know if there's any right or wrong way to grieve, but I didn't really have I didn't have an adequate grieving period before
Yeah.
just launching my life before my dad died. He died when I was around your like age 35, and
Okay.
I didn't really grieve. I didn't write it out. I didn't figure stuff out. I just like launched into the next part of my life, although a
Yeah.
different person. But what's interesting is that in all three scenarios, I mean, and it's weird that I don't know why I'm interviewing people like literally all within 2 weeks. I've got to believe the universe is telling me something.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, but what was interesting is in every case, when you have a loved one die that's very close to you, there's this kind of like, what is the meaning of life? And
Yeah.
even I'm kind of curious. Like I've been thinking, like, why is that the case? I walked away with that feeling. So did so did the guy that, his mother died. So did the guy yesterday.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And it sounds like so did you. So what is it
Yeah.
about? And that's made me curious. Like, what about death makes us all of a sudden, a death of a makes us all of a sudden start thinking about the meaning of life? And I don't have an answer yet, but I'm pondering.
Yeah.
Do you have an answer?
Well, I mean, I did say in my book, like when a parent dies, because no matter how par no matter how prepared you think you are, it's like an earthquake or a tsunami sweeps through your life. And no
Hmm.
matter how hard you try to rebuild, something intangible is lost forever. And I think it's like maybe the first time that mm, we see this unique reflection of ourselves.
Hmm.
You know, these people that brought us into the world, and you take them for granted in some way. I mean, not totally, but there is a certain level of like taking them for granted, and they're always there, and then they disappear, and you're like, well, who am I now without that guiding light in my life?
Hmm.
And the soul ache. I think I write about this, that I've always had this soul ache, and I mean, I probably started writing about the soul ache at 17 when I started writing. And I think it's, I mean, there were some real dark times where I was like thinking about one in particular where I was like, I don't think I can go on anymore. I don't think I
Hmm.
can go on with this like deep, like pain in my heart and my soul. And, I think it's always evolving what I'm learning about it. But it's there for us to ascend.
Hmm.
It is, like Rumi would say, the wound is where the light comes in.
Hmm.
And I also think, you know, it's calling us to awaken to the fact that we are not separate,
Hmm.
because that is the cause of, you know, everything from like a family breaking up to wars, like this illusion that we're separate. And, I said in the beginning of the book, in my author's note, something like, this is fictionalized, but the truer tale is the internal journey of this book. Because, I mean, and then I went on to say, you know, the last thing I need is a public lashing from Oprah, because
Mm-hmm.
what she did to James
Right.
Spray when that's a whole other sidebar. But so where was I?
I got an
The
aha though
17.
from what you said. Do you want me to share my
Yeah,
aha?
share, please
So,
do.
as you were talking, I realized. So, I didn't have any religion that I was brought up with, and so I didn't believe. I think there's a part of me that just believes that there was a part of me because everyone said that there was that there is God, which is a white bearded individual in the sky. I didn't really
Mm-hmm.
have any of those religious beliefs. I literally was brought up with zero religion. Both of my parents immigrated from China. And so they
Uh-huh.
didn't, during their formative years, they didn't go to church. They were just trying to survive. So, and flee from communist China. So that's my background. And
Wow.
so my parents were the closest thing to God that I had. If there's an authority figure that
That's
loves
true. Yeah.
you, cares for you, takes care of you, then I just realized that must be when that happens, when that break happens, it's like kind of the fall from grace. Just like, when people feel separated from God, when your
Yeah.
parents leave, there's all of a sudden wait a second, there is no thing out, not this like white bearded individual looking after me, or definitely my parent, two little Asian people in the middle of New
Yeah.
Jersey looking after me. Like there's nothing.
You're from New Jersey too?
I am from New Jersey.
Oh my God. The
So,
best of us get out. That's what I always say.
exactly. So, yeah, so I think that's what it is. It's all of a sudden when your parents, for me, what I'm getting from this is when your parents leave, then there's this incredible sense of like, well, then what is the nurturing container of which I'm part of? And then that great separation and feeling of pain and loss comes
Yeah.
in, even though you may conceptually understand that it isn't, that we aren't separate. When that the
Yeah.
pain of a loss of a person, or my two boys, that my youngest who's going to be leaving next year, that pain is so deep because it's, even though he's not an authority figure, it's like that pain of loss of connection, or your
Yeah.
girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
It's so painful because that's kind of the person walks out the door grave, and
Yeah.
it is a loss of physical connection and the sense
Yeah.
of aloneness, which is something that you write about in your book. What was it that you were feeling when your mom died, or even last week? It's like a sense of loneliness, like it's the deep physical separation of something that once was.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's like becoming anchorless or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought I was prepared, and then I just well, this is a good segue into something about the book, but I thought I was prepared, and you almost fantasize about but fantasize is the wrong word, but you're like, what is this going to be like when this person is gone?
Mm-hmm.
What's that day going to be like? Blah blah blah. And I just it I went into this super lost. I mean, I went home to say goodbye to my mom in May, and I came back like 2 weeks later, and my freelance job was gone. They're like, sorry, it doesn't exist anymore. So then I had like 2 months that summer that I wasn't working, and I was just like waiting, like going on a lot of runs and pacing my room and waiting for my mom to die because she was in hospice. So my mom died, and it just really, I was felt so lost. And God, if I put myself there, I have to have compassion for. I was just doing the best I could, and I just it's a singular life experience. I wrote about that. It's like anyway. Um, I wound up talking to this friend of my sister who's like an energy healer and stuff, and she's like, "Okay, you're a writer. Yeah, okay. I want you to do this exercise. I want you to write down 5 things you're grateful for and 5 things you want to create, and you're going to find that what you create today, you're going to become grateful for in the future." And I was like, I'll try anything right now. I'm
Right.
just so hurting and so lost. And so I started doing that. And, the first thing I needed was like the right job for right now. And I surrendered money and everything else. And within like a week and a half, I got this job. And, I wanted like a cool boss. I wanted freedom, and I wanted like friends, like
Mm.
people that I really dug working with. one of the guys became like one of my closest friends. He designed my
Mm.
book cover, and my boss, he was like, it was a 3 month contract. Then he extended it to 6 months. And all the time I'm creating, I knew I was leaving in 6 months, and I'm creating all these things. Like, I want to be of service when I travel. I want to, I want a free MacBook Air. And like, I was just testing things, right? Just, the woman was like, write it down, close it, have no connection to it. So I get this free MacBook Air for work. And at the end of 6 months, my boss is like, would you be interested in working 10 to 20 hours while you're in India? So the first 3 months I was in India, and I was like, hell yeah, I would. Because I was, it's so cheap. So I'm making money while I'm traveling, which was like a dream of mine, to be paid to travel
Right.
the world.
Yeah.
And it came through corporate America, which is just the funniest damn thing in the world. So at the end of 3 months, I had miles. So I flew home to surprise my family for a family reunion. And then I had a free plane ticket back to Asia because I was doing some work with a friend as this international school photographer's assistant. Hilarious. Paid me $500, free room, boards, booze, board for all the time that I worked with them.
Wait, an
Staying, and
international
I'm
photographer's assistant.
yeah, international school photographer's assistant. There's a whole chapter on it. It's a pretty funny chapter.
Okay.
So so yeah, I at the end of that 3 months, as I'm going back to Asia, I stop in the office for like 3 or 4 days. My boss pulls me aside and he's like, "You're going to need money to travel. Bill me for bill me for 30 hours a week for the last 3 months of your contract." So I went back to Asia and I had two incomes coming in,
Wow.
and I was staying at like business hotels for free. So I was just making money as I was going.
Wow.
I
Great.
only had enough money to travel for 4 months, 3, 4 months. And I came home 15 months later with more money than I left with. Paid off a credit card while I was traveling. Like,
Wow.
I know, I have to
Wow.
remember I'm a powerful manifester in these little places, when you're like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow. Wow.
And then, I wanted to be of service, and I got connected to this guy who's won the equivalent of two Nobel Prizes, like India's most important
Oh my
lawyer.
gosh. Right.
Sued the state of India for over 20 years to create a green zone around the Taj Mahal. Had
Hmm.
1,200 industries removed. So, I still do that exercise all the time. And that was like this, I guess you can almost say that was this little gift that came out of my mother's, passing. It's like, here's
Yeah.
this powerful exercise. And, now it's amazing because I've been thinking about being a writer since I was 17, and I've been fantasizing about, I know what I want people to experience when I read it, and I fantasize about how they read it. And, people will write me and they'll be like, you kept me up till 2 o'clock last night. Like, I plowed through 10 chapters on a flight last night. And, and then people are like, I started doing this exercise, and it's like it's changing my perspective. And so, yeah, I'm giving myself a pep talk right now. By the way, like,
I'm glad that the conclusion is supposed to be like an inspiring pep talk. So you're kind of like giving yourself a pep talk. You've given the audience a pep talk. We're all
I should
good.
say
Okay.
everybody,
So
like, I'm like, when I'm giving people advice, or my nephew or something. By the way, I'm giving myself a pep talk right now. I have to listen to what I'm saying and internalize it. So,
okay, so tell me what you in the final minute, tell me about what you hope that readers get from your book, or what, tell me a little bit about what your hopes and dreams are for the book. So you talked about that they'll man start moving themselves and going like, I learned enough from the book that I'm now living this
yeah.
kind of same life. What are some of the other dreams and goals you have for the book?
Well, I would, through a whole series of serendipities, like, I was told to like self-publish, and I was like, I don't want to self-publish, but I've done that. So I want to get like a major publishing deal. I'd love it to become a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the way people, what I want people to take away is that, like, thoughts are energy, and thoughts are real things. And, you know, to heal the world, the only way we're going to heal the world is through consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step is to healing yourself. So like, people got to stop looking outward and blaming people, and like look inwards, and I mean, and I'm dealing with it right now. It's like I have to learn to love myself at a much deeper level. And, when you are that, when you become that, then you become a light for others, and you become, energetically a wave. When somebody amazing walks in the room, you're like, you can feel somebody who's joyful. And, um, so really, I want people to think, act, and feel when they read my book. And people are like, I was laughing in this chapter, I was crying in this chapter,
Yeah.
and I'm doing the gratitude and intention journal, and I'm doing all this other stuff. So it's incredibly rewarding when I get letters from people around the world. I'm like, how the hell did you find this book? But word of mouth, I guess, is starting to happen. So
A Curious Year in the Great Vivarium is the name of the
yeah,
book. That's
yeah.
great.
And the URL is acuriousyear.com. And you can, there's a beautiful book trailer that was filmed in India, and my nephew scored the music. And eventually we'll be actually launching a soundtrack to the book that's really
Oh,
amazing.
cool.
My nephew created, and it's like this killer, like KXP indie style.
Yeah.
KXP is a radio station, but
Yeah.
like killer thing. So go to acuriousyear.com to learn more about it. Finally, I remembered to plug my book. Every podcast I do, I get to the end, I'm like, shit, I forgot to mention the book. I love having conversations. So I really appreciate the time. I loved our conversation. So
Me too. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show, and love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.